Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to talk about some more missed opportunities in Star Trek Discovery. That's something I often mention in all my reviews of that show. I was even making excuses for some stuff, like things that could be easily explained away. I did explain them away. I did make up whole theories to explain away all the mistakes they did with continuity and all that stuff. I could have lived with that. I even made a long video about time travel saying that's the perfect plot device to explain away all continuity mistakes. You can simply say a new timeline gets created because of all the time traveling. So I could have lived with all of their continuity mistakes and all of that, even though I was always a purist and a perfectionist, but I'm old enough to realize that, for the sake of a good story and some originality and as not having to explain everything all the time, I would be fine with them kind of rebooting the whole thing. If it's worth it, if it's good enough, then I'll be fine with that. I would make excuses for that. I would try to justify it. But the fact is that the show itself just wasn't that good. The writing wasn't that good. It had some pretty fancy special effects. It did have some clever moments, and I'll mention a few of them in this video. But overall, they had so much stupidity, and the characters were so inconsistent and so badly written sometimes. Like, for example, Michael Burnham is said to have been raised by Vulcans. She's shown in that flashback scene that she's behaving totally like a Vulcan, and just a few years later she's totally like a human, which I'm fine with. I remember I said that's fine because a few years passed, so I can accept the fact that she abandoned her Vulcan education and became more human, but then she starts crying every single episode. And so I was constantly thinking, wait a second, so you have all that teaching of the Vulcan disciplines, and yet she cannot control herself, she's crying from every little thing every episode, and at the same time they're always showing her to be such a tough woman. She stands toe to toe with Klingons and beats them up, she's so brave, she's so amazing, but she cries from every little thing, and oftentimes she cries for other people, like they're trying to show her to be so sympathetic, she's such an awesome character, such morality, so she often cries for other people or for that tardigrade creature. So she's constantly crying every single episode, and that contradicts her own backstory because she was supposed to be more like a Vulcan, and yet she's the complete opposite. But anyway, I didn't really want to talk about the characters in this video. I wanted to mention a few things, a few ideas I had. I remember as I was watching and I expected them to do them and then they didn't, and I thought that was a very big missed opportunity. And not because they were my ideas, but because they seem to be setting up something, and I thought it's not just there for no reason. I thought they are going to do something with it. For example, the Tribble in season 1, they kept showing that Lorca had a Tribble on his desk. And so when I saw that, I thought to myself, oh, that's not there for no reason. It's probably going to be used later. Maybe he will genetically augment that Tribble, maybe use it as a weapon against Klingon colonies. We know that the Klingons only eat living food, so they cannot replicate it. Maybe they don't even have replicators yet, so maybe they have a lot of farming planets. And so if Lorca sends a Tribble which has been augmented to destroy all their food supplies, that could explain why the Tribble was considered to be their major enemy later and all of that. And they even had that plot line of the Klingons not having enough food in one episode, and yet they never did anything with that Tribble, it just disappeared later. And I have a lot of examples like that of all kinds of stuff they seem to be introducing or seem to want to tie with something else in the other shows and didn't. And so I constantly was disappointed. I kept making speculations and theories about what I thought would be a neat idea, and they didn't do any of them. And it's too bad because they often had like the perfect setup to do that and they didn't do anything. So for example, the ending of season 2, when they introduced that whole evil AI control and all of that, it really didn't seem to fit the time frame because, later on, no one is scared from AI. There was an episode in TOS in which they gave control of the ship to an AI, and it was said to be something brand new, and no one seemed to be worried about it. So it doesn't seem to fit the idea that only a few years previously there was an evil AI that almost took over the whole Federation. And even later, no one was ever scared from AI in the later shows in TNG. No one ever said that AI might be dangerous because of something happened in the past. Now, I could accept the idea that they simply classified all of what happened with the control AI, but they could have exploited that whole plot to explain things and to tie it better with TOS and other shows. For example, they showed us that this AI was able to use holograms to mimic other people, to pretend to be other people in Starfleet in order to give false commands and manipulate other ships and all of that. That I actually think was a clever idea. It also fits something that might be a reality in the near future, because even now we have technology like the deepfake and all those kinds of softwares that are able to put one person's face on someone else, and you could technically use that to frame someone, to show someone doing something or saying something he never did. And I think that will soon be a very real problem, because you could frame people and you cannot trust any real video evidence anymore, because if it's possible to fake such an evidence, then you cannot trust it either. So that will influence a huge amount of things in our society, in the justice system, on social media, and so on. It's going to be a huge problem. And so I thought that bit in Star Trek Discovery was actually clever, and I wish they would have explored it more. I wish they would have offered possible solutions for that. You know, that's what science fiction always used to do. They always show us the worst case scenario, what could go wrong if some technology gets developed, which might have a lot of benefits, but also can be used for evil, and what we can do about it. So it's like a warning. And so I thought that little bit was actually interesting. I actually liked that. But again, they didn't really do anything with it. So it was quickly mentioned that Control is able to imitate people, and that's it. They never really explored it further than that. So what would I have done with that idea? I would have said that because of everything that happened with that evil AI that almost destroyed all life in the galaxy, and because it was able to manipulate Starfleet, it hacked Starfleet subspace relays. They said something like that. Also, they didn't really do anything with it. They said that it's monitoring all subspace communication. It appears as holograms of people to manipulate all of Starfleet. I think, first of all, they should have done more with that. They should have shown it to be a much bigger problem. Show maybe some Starfleet ships being sent against other ships, kind of a civil war in Starfleet. Instead of having those dozens of Section 31 ships, which was a silly idea anyway, they should have just had a bunch of Starfleet ships being manipulated or taken over in some way. So anyway, I expected that in the end, after the dust settles, maybe they'll use that whole plot of the evil AI to explain away the technology that we saw in TOS, which seemed to be much more primitive because it was made back in the 60s, and it's kind of a continuity problem between that show and this one. And so this plot line was actually a perfect opportunity to explain away that seemingly visual contradiction. They could have said that because this evil AI almost took over everything, that they're now taking precautions, maybe for a while, maybe temporarily precautions for a few years, before they set up more clever precautions that would enable them to use their advanced technology. But for a while, they'll start using a more primitive way of doing things, simply to make sure that no such AI will be able to do that again. So they could have said that for the near future they're banning all use of holographic technology in Starfleet because it can be used to imitate people and to manipulate people or to spy on people inside starships. You know, if a hologram appears and it's able to look around, it's able to see everything on the ship, it's kind of dangerous. Maybe it's better to restrict all communications to view screens for now. And also maybe not to rely on Wi-Fi so much, maybe to transition to more hardware use, which is not connected to anything. So that could explain why they always use those little discs. In TOS, they always had those little tapes, they called it, I think, tapes, that they had to put into slots and all of that, which always kind of begs the question, why didn't they simply transmit it by Wi-Fi on the ship? And so maybe for security reasons, they would deliberately restrict all of those things to hard copies that they have to physically insert, or even on paper. That can explain why in some episodes we see paper being used and not touch screens, not pads, because, you know, paper cannot be hacked by anyone from outside the ship. So that would be a brilliant way to prevent anyone from spying on any sensitive information. And that thing that Spock always looked into, that little scope, can also be explained. Maybe it only gives information after it scans its eyes, it confirms that it's really Spock or any of the other officers, and only then it gives you that readout. This way no hologram will be able to look at it and so on. So they could have explained away all of those visual contradictions by simply saying in the last episode of season 2 that Starfleet will now take heavy precautions and security measures to prevent any AI, or anyone else for that matter, from being able to hack into their ships, because they now discover this vulnerability that it's so easy to fool their officers with holograms. And maybe from now on they will only communicate by view screens, and each side will scan the person speaking to make sure it's a real person by taking all his readings and then encrypting the transmission and limiting it to the view screen so that the hologram cannot scan anything on the bridge which it's not supposed to see, and that on the ship itself they will only carry information from one station to another on those tapes, and not by Wi-Fi, because the Wi-Fi can be easily hacked from outside of the ship. So they could have explained away all of those things by simply saying it's a security measure to prevent the same kind of situation. That would provide a proper explanation for that discrepancy, and also it would be clever on its own. That would be kind of an interesting idea of how to deal with the technology when it goes too far. Maybe it's a good idea to kind of limit technology a little bit. And so I think that was a huge missed opportunity. They could have so easily tied it with the plotline they had anyway. And what did they do instead? They said that, just the holograms on the Enterprise broke down. So everybody will still have holograms, only in the Enterprise will never have them again, and they'll never be able to fix it. Even 10 years later, when Kirk had the Enterprise, it simply didn't have holograms. That specific ship didn't have them. Even though whenever we saw other ships, and even later in the movies, They still didn't have holograms, so it doesn't really make sense as an excuse. So they kept bringing us those lazy excuses, and they were so annoying because of that laziness that I rather they wouldn't have explained it at all. I would have rather not to have an explanation, and then I could pretend it's simply a reboot. It's simply a new timeline, like in my video about the time travel creating new timelines with more advanced technology because of all the stuff that people forgot in the past. In all kinds of time travel episodes, a lot of people brought technology to the past, and maybe people found the technology, and that's why technology is now so much more advanced in the past of Star Trek, so it's basically like a reboot. I would have preferred that, but because they had those lazy excuses that are supposed to explain the discrepancy, then that ruins that too. So now we don't have any proper excuses. And so that's even more annoying that way. Rather, they wouldn't have tried to explain it away if they cannot do it properly. And I think they could have. And so that's what annoys me most of all about Star Trek Discovery. It's all the missed opportunities they had. I really feel like that's the most annoying thing about it, because they could have done it, they almost did it, I was expecting them to do it, and then they totally missed the opportunity. So yeah, that was really annoying. And all those internal self-contradictions, there was so much nonsense in those last few episodes of season 2, and they could have easily explained it away, or arranged it differently so that it wouldn't be a problem. For example, in those last episodes, they couldn't contact Starfleet, so that way they were alone against Section 31, and I understand that setup. They wanted it to be a one-sided battle, they wanted to be the underdog, that's fine, but they didn't explain it away, so it sounds so stupid, because why didn't they call Starfleet for help? And they said something, they threw some line in there about Section 31 jamming their subspace communication, and yet Ambassador Sarek kept coming to their ship to meet Michael, and then goes away, and yet they never asked him to go to Starfleet and tell them what's going on. So Starfleet was totally unaware of everything that was going on, the whole threat to the whole galaxy. No one came to their help, and then only in the last second, Ash Tyler took a shuttle and went to the Klingons and returned 5 minutes later with a whole fleet of Klingon ships. And so I remember thinking, why didn't anyone do that with Starfleet? Why didn't anyone take a shuttle to go to Starfleet to ask for help? Or simply tell Sarek to do that? He was there anyway. He came over to visit Michael, then he went away and never bothered to go to Starfleet. Or send some other shuttles. So nothing made sense if you think about it. And why didn't they use the spore drive to simply put some distance between themselves and Section 31 before they disabled it to charge that crystal? Or why didn't they spore jump to Earth, into the heart of Starfleet, where they can talk to people, explain the situation, and then have the protection of all of Starfleet? No one even suggested that, no one even thought about those possibilities, and so that was really driving me crazy, how illogical everything was and all the missed opportunities. And they could have easily explained it away. They could have had that same kind of setup that they wanted to have in the end if they simply had a proper explanation. So that kind of thing really drove me nuts, and especially the missed opportunities, especially all the places in which they could have done something good and they missed the opportunity. So to me, that was the most frustrating thing about the show, because they almost did it good in some places. They did have some good ideas. They could have built on that. They could have done something awesome, and they totally missed the opportunity. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on this topic. Let me know what you think in the comments below and we can discuss it, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.